Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Vertical Futures. My name is Yael Shemer. I'm the co founder of Tulu. And today I have a very special guest. We have John O'Donnell. John, welcome to the show. John is the director of portfolio operations at Woodmont Properties and a partner of ours. And today we're going to talk about resident experience. We're going to talk about the future and the challenges that lie in real estate and hear from John stories from their own properties. So, John, thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations again on your Series A funding recently. I saw the outreach was amazing, and I know your product is really going to benefit and continue to be transformative.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really incredible to receive support from our partners and from residents that are using Tulu. I told my co-founder like the coolest thing beyond all is just to get actual notes from residents to say, "Oh my God, I have this in my building. I had no idea it's a startup, and I have no idea that there's so much purpose and intention that goes into this product." So, yeah, it was a really cool few weeks. Before we dive into your experience, I wanted to ask you, you've been around the real estate industry for many years. You've been with Woodmont for many years. I know that this industry is a special one. And I wanted to ask you, what got you started in real estate? What was it about those early days that made you want to choose a career path in this industry?
It's a great question. Honestly, when I was a senior in college for my undergrad degree, I had a strong advisor. And based on my skill set, he told me I should take an interview with a company that's called John M. Corcoran Company up in the Boston area. I didn't know much about property management, to be honest with you, but I thought it behooved me to take the interview and listen to him, hear what they had to offer, right? I really loved everything that they brought to the table. It was customer facing. I grew up in a hospitality setting in restaurants, so my skill set the foundation was there. And they told me they'd give me a call when I graduated college. And a couple months later, the day after, they called me and I took the offer and figured I'd give it a try. And honestly, I fell in love with it. I loved how dynamic it was in terms of every day is a little different. You don't see the typical rinse and repeat tasks every day. You could be really focused on maintenance one day. You can be doing a carousel of tours the next day. You can be focused on renewals. So I love how nimble this industry is. And I'm outgoing by nature. And I love working with my peers and customers and really trying to provide value and ultimately a win for everyone involved.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's one of the most dynamic industries that there's out there. And I feel like people that find themselves in property management or in real estate usually tend to be multidisciplinary and get attracted to different aspects of the human experience and also on the built environment. And it kind of takes me to the next question. It looks like from the course of the last 5 years, you've managed properties in over 6 states. You moved from being a community manager to now a director of portfolio operations at Woodmont. Tell us about this journey. Tell us about what were the pivotal moments and insights that accelerated this trajectory for you.
Yeah, so I work at Woodmont Properties, and we're vertically integrated, and I work with very talented people who are experts in what they do, right? So I realized very early often that they were going to afford me a seat at the table. And I tried to just be a sponge and learn from everyone around me as best I could, understanding that if I can understand construction better, if I can understand finance better, if I can understand where accounting's coming from, it will all impact me positively in property management on an on-site capacity. And separately, my mentor and manager, we've been partnered for the past 5 years, and she has been my biggest cheerleader as well as my toughest critic. And I mean that in the best possible way. She gives me honest, transparent, timely feedback consistently. And that always provided me with the opportunity to understand exactly where I was in terms of personal and professional development, how to refine what I was working on, what to focus on to improve, and also maybe what to double down on for what was working well. And I really value that partnership, and we continue to build today. And at the on-site level, it's really such a well-rounded business that you have to really take the time to learn all of it. You can't just focus on leasing. You have to understand maintenance. Within maintenance, you have to really take the time to understand how the product was built and the mechanicals behind it when you're starting to see the need for like a large scale repair, like a leak, understanding where the plumbing systems flow from is critical in those time sensitive moments. It really all contributes to how you can develop and grow professionally. And I think I really took the time to do that, but not in a vacuum. I had an incredible support network around me with these experts and these talented associates that I get to work with every day.
That's awesome. And I think no matter where you're coming from, having someone that believes in you and a mentor that challenges you is just priceless, and something that I hope more young professionals will get from their workplace or from their community, because it's really just those one of those things that shapes you to be a better leader. You actually mentioned something that is coming up in my next question about the ground truth gap. In real estate and in property management, there's leadership. We always work with developers. We always work with people that are overseeing massive projects. And then there's the on-site team, the people that actually see when there's a crack in the wall and when there's the front desk malfunction, or granular things that actually influence the entire system. I wanted to ask you, you are both working hands on at the property and also leading portfolio wide operations. What is some of the biggest disconnect that you've observed between what happens on the ground versus what leadership thinks? And how do you bridge this gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on site for about 13 years and I really came up through the linear path of, I started as a leasing professional, worked my way up towards an assistant manager and then ultimately community manager and growing my portfolio from there. So understanding what each level experiences on a day to day, the stresses involved, the high volume that can come in. It can be slow at times. It can be stressful. It's not lost on me that we currently live in a world of digital instant gratification. Everyone wants their answer as quickly as possible, resolved as quickly as possible. And understanding and just leaning on my experience on site, I know intimately that a community manager, as an example, could walk on site first thing in the morning and before they have their first cup of coffee or get to welcome their team, they could be hit with a leak. There could be a sign that fell down to the entry of their community. They could experience anything from A to Z, and they're consistently putting out what I like to call micro fires, right? And you have to bridge that gap to understand in like a senior leadership role, there's always that macro strategy that you're focused on business objectives and driving successful outcomes. But the reality of it is you're managing people at the end of the day, and they're all experiencing different stress levels. So the root of it all is really just proactive communication. Some managers are great at it at an on-site level. They're quick to raise their hand and say, hey, we have these things going on as a heads up. I'm not going to be able to meet these deadlines that we previously discussed, but I am actively working on it. I just need a little bit of time, which is fantastic. But other times you do need to lean in as a manager and understand, hey, something's off here, and ask those questions and kind of drill in, because I am a strong advocate of, I'm at the corporate level now, but I've really considered myself to be support staff. We're in positions right now to support the on-site teams to put them in the best position to succeed. So I want to remove the stigma behind, hey, I'm drowning over here with all these micro fires I'm dealing with. I want you to raise your hand and realize that I'm going to say, how can I help? Not why can you not meet this deadline? If we can remove that stigma and bridge that gap, I think ultimately everything just moves in alignment and is more successful as a result.
No problem is small enough, and also it's all part of a greater strategy that really puts the resident in the first place and really thinks about life at the property. And it's really cool because when we're working with property managers, it's actually so tangible. It's like you're operating somewhere where people live and sleep and they have their greatest moments of their lives. And I wanted to ask you about the operational side of it. We now know, of course, with AI, how many things can get accelerated and solved faster. But can you walk us through maybe a few cases that you've seen where there were maybe some operational inefficiencies, and you were able to map a process, improve it, and then just change the framework around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the bigger part of this conversation really is around the cross-functional relationships we have internally. We're a vertically integrated firm, so we're working amongst peers, which is a game changer internally, right? this past year, we really made it a focus to create an artificial intelligence committee internally. And that is comprised of essentially every department head and then some key players from each department as well. And with that, we're able to create a safe space to give open and honest feedback, to really evaluate the business, try to find potential gaps in the business where we can optimize and improve them, and really focus as a unit to support each other and identify what's priority, create safe spaces with guardrails to test new AI, have feedback loops on if we foresee this really benefiting the business overall longer term, or we gave it a try through a pilot and it's not a match for us, but we're happy we looked at it and we can compare it to other solutions and really be nimble in terms of and selective about what we choose to implement, right? We are a smaller operator in terms of employee size against like a gray star, as an example. So being selective is important, but I think the underlying value for us is really to work backwards and understand what the business case is and the problem is, and then work into the solution from there. And that's something from the top down we're all aligned on and we're all in the same boat working towards the same goal. Once you understand what the problem is, you can put yourself in the best position to put a solution in place that will impact the most associates as possible, right? I think property management was the first benefactor of this committee, quite frankly, and we put an AI software in place for property management. It functions 24/7 and it's an omni-channel response over phone, text, chat, and email. And the intent of that is to work side by side with our on-site teams and really mitigate the high volume, low value conversations that eat up a chunk of their time so that we can repurpose that time on the low volume, high impact conversations like a renewal conversation, which is meaningful. You're talking about someone's residents and ensuring that their happiness at one of our communities and really leaning in to identify anything with their residency that could improve or impact their decision to renew their lease. And we want to spend time in those conversations and not make them feel rushed and be face to face and present as much as possible. And I think with the alignment across departments, it's really meaningful because you get feedback that might be in a blind spot or you weren't considering based on your own expertise. So it's a very well rounded assessment of what we're deciding to tackle and implement.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. You've mentioned renewal calls and you've mentioned high volume, low value aspects of the resident experience. And I'm curious to learn from you over the course of the last few years, how has the resident expectation changed in your opinion? Maybe could you tell us a bit about the demographic of the people that live in Woodmont properties and also what you're noticing that has changed in terms of the resident expectation?
Yeah, with new starts, we primarily operate in a class A luxury apartment product. And with that, in all of our markets, we're seeing new starts increase exponentially year over year. In a competitive environment where your asset type is somewhat apples to apples in terms of an amenity package and product type and floor plan and size and potentially rates of apartments themselves, it really boils down to the customer service experience that you can provide at the on-site level. And part of our onboarding process for new associates and ongoing from there is shopping competition to understand what's around you, which is very much intentional because you really understand what the impact of just taking a simple apartment community tour can have on your perception of that community and the customer service provided. And you can walk away from that and understand, hey, I felt like I didn't really get to experience this at the level that I thought it was. And, you can compare that against what you're offering internally. And you're going to realize very quickly the importance of providing that elevated service and making it a consistent focus to put yourself in the best position to succeed in a competitive market.
Yeah. Makes me think about the amount of times that we get called to bring Tulu to a property after someone went shopping at a building, and we had no idea that the industry, I would say all U.S. states, has a certain amount of buildings that are being looked at, and also amenities that are being looked at. And sometimes after a few years, some amenities don't actually make an impact, and other ones do make an impact. Did you have a case in which, after a shopping experience, you decided to change things in your own properties, or you were actually more confident in changes that you've made?
I think it gives our associates real confidence when they walk away from that process because it's towards the end of onboarding and it really kind of makes you reflect on everything that you've learned and you see it live in action and you can kind of get a benchmark against what your own expectations and what our standards are internally to perform and operate to the best of your ability. I think ultimately we really rely heavily on feedback and are just perceptive of that as best as we can. And not only analyze data that comes in, but put it into motion quickly, thoughtfully, of course. But we have resident online reviews, we have resident sentiment scores, and we have resident surveys that come in across multiple touch points throughout prospect stage to move out. And we get those consistently. And we are always analyzing those for trends and patterns to optimize our business, understand if we're missing the mark in any areas, whether we realize it or not on the customer service front. And those surveys help keep it top of mind and in front of you and help to maintain focus on it. And when trends are identified, we can really allocate resources to try to help overcome those challenges, whether it's through our operations team that supports multiple communities, someone at the corporate level really leaning in and maybe revamping a current service or process that is maybe aged or becoming archaic and not as competitive to hopefully improve everything for both our associates and ultimately our residents.
That's awesome. Is there a trend, an operational trend or an experience trend that you think our industry is sleeping on that you think will be more meaningful in the next 3 to 5 years?
You know, I was just discussing this with our SVP of property management, and I really think the future is self guided touring, which I think there was a significant amount of untapped potential there, which is quickly being realized now across all asset classes because you can maximize your touring opportunities beyond your operational hours. So your conversion rates are potentially higher with more tours. You have the ability to convert. However, I foresee this with the rapid acceleration of technology. I am hopeful that the affordability of virtual reality will come down as that market becomes more competitive, which I think we're beginning to see. And I would love for a world of a digital self-guided tour where you don't have to leave your home and you can put on a virtual reality headset through a link and you can take a customized self-guided tour through a community that's carefully curated with voiceover explanations of each room. And that would be particularly meaningful because you don't have the ability to physically travel. Potentially you're out of state. And it would be a game changer because you could really see it in a realistic way. And with future advancements, there's probably the ability to add in how to put it to scale and potentially measure a floor plan in a virtual reality environment. Say you rented an apartment and you're moving in and you want to know what your balcony size is, and you could digitally walk through that and measure it would be an incredible thing to see.
The future is
Mhm.
already here. This is actually, I've never heard someone describe self-guided tours like this. I think it's super promising, and I hope, as you've mentioned, technology will be more affordable to create those, and also more properties will integrate it because it is a game changer. And as you know, we tailor Tulu to Gen Zs and millennials. And one of the biggest things we're seeing is just the challenge with the higher costs that are associated with moving to a new city. And that's why we've created Tulu for people to be able to move to a new location and not have to buy like 15 to 20 appliances that are just so expensive and inconveniently into store, etc. I think when your property from day one, even from before you move in, thinks about those things for you, probably automatically creates more trust in the vendor and is a game changer for the younger demographic and also for all socioeconomical classes because it really does make an impact on how much you're going to spend when you move to a new place.
100%.
Let's talk a little bit more about you. I got a chance to join you and your team at a few calls, and I can really sense the appreciation your team has for you as a leader. And I'm curious to learn about if your leadership philosophy has evolved. I mean, I'm sure it has evolved, but how has it evolved? And if there's one thing that you wish you knew earlier in your career that now has become a guiding principle.
Yeah, earlier in my career, particularly as like a community manager, I really tried to shoulder the burden of everything, right? Ultimately, it all falls to you on site, regardless of the scenario. However, I would try to make up ground everywhere I could and really try to make it all happen in a vacuum and not rely on my team or provide them the ability to have me delegate items that could potentially stretch them. And it's going to accelerate their growth, which is ultimately going to accelerate their contributions to the team. So it's a win win scenario. And that did not come easy to me. I was somewhat stubborn in my earlier years, but once I leaned in and made it a focus and saw the value it could provide and the unlocked opportunities it could provide my team. I think one of the most rewarding things you can have as a manager at any level is to see your team win, particularly a high visibility win that impacts the company at scale, where it really is like a win in the eyes of a resident, and that results in a significantly impactful positive online review. It's just a very rewarding feeling. I think at this level, I really focus on trying to build confidence in my team. They have all the skills. They're in these seats for a reason. And I want to give them a safe space to make these decisions, but know that I'm going to support them regardless of the outcome. If we win, it's their win. If we fail together and we learn from it. Making organic mistakes is how you learn fast. And the trick is trying not to repeat them, right? And that's something I've always tried to do in my own career, and I try to pass that down to everyone around me. I'll always be a people manager first, even self-sacrifice. I'll push my work to the side. If you raise your hand and you need me, I'm there, regardless of the time or day. And I really make it a priority to focus on my team, get to know them on a personal level. Because if I have that rapport turns into trust. And when I show up for them, they'll show up for me. And it's a two-way street. And we're all human at the end of the day. And we have to balance our personal and professional lives. But if we spend time to get to know each other, understand how each other ticks, it just makes things fall in place much easier and it feels seamless, right? It makes it almost fun because you just know more about that person and you want to see them succeed. And I think I love that professionally the most of all things.
I really very much relate to what you say. And I think there's really no other way to work well with other humans by showing up as who you are, but also having immense respect to people's goals. And then just as a team, being able to make that progress together. And I wish more people view their working relationships with the people around them like that. I think it will create for a better society, honestly. And as we get towards the end of the interview, there's two more questions I want to ask you. The first is about opportunities and challenges in our industry. What is one thing that you feel like is going to become a really big challenge? And what is one opportunity that you and your team perhaps are looking forward to?
I think the biggest challenge currently is how we view optimizing workflows and processes with artificial intelligence, but still maintaining that high level of personalized customer experience, maintaining those face to face conversations. And if you don't have them organically, finding an opportunity to consistently make them happen, whether that's through resident events that you hold more frequently, or you potentially hold like a monthly town hall type scenario where anyone can kind of pop in and reach the office team, whether virtually or in person. But you want to be approachable and you never want to lose sight of the fact that you're there to support residents and make their lives easier. You want them to have a great place to work and live and play in their community, right? So maintaining that personalized face-to-face interaction can be a challenge with all these technological advances. I think with opportunity on the horizon is really understanding the feedback that we get. One thing that we do internally, and I have to shout out our people division, is amazing at generating associate feedback through surveys internally. And it's no surprise that we've won awards both at the state and national level as a result, because they seek that feedback so often. They can aggregate it and they can share it with senior leadership, and we can review it and we can put change into place to really understand where any shortcomings are, or any associate feedback that's actionable, no matter the size. And we really take it to heart to make that happen. And we all buy into that culture. And it's an amazing culture. And that is what kind of accelerates and snowballs it. We're all working towards the same goals, and we want each other to have a great place to work and continue to focus on this feedback, because it's incredibly important. Because if your associates ultimately love what they do and they love showing up to work every day, the business results are going to take care of themselves. I really love that our people division makes that a consistent focus and shares those results with senior leadership across the board and makes them transparent and communicates often about why it's important. And I think if we continue to focus on that as an opportunity as an organization, we'll continue to succeed.
100%. Amazing and inspiring. And my last question is, if you could redesign the future of multifamily and resident experience with, without any constraints, without any legacy, what would it be? What would you add? How would you redescribe the resident experience?
I envision a world of multiple scenarios, and I would love to see a path where you can maintain your existing traditional patterns of walking in for a tour, meeting with the person, sitting down with them to work through every step needed for move in. You can still take your traditional tour and you can handle things status quo. But I would love to see the ability to pick and choose what we can automate, right? In a world of tech, you can now have online checklists that automate reminders of what needs to get done for the people that have busier schedules and they don't have the time to be physically present. Maybe they want to, but they don't have the time to do that. But it's hard to keep everything in front of you, right? So you need to set up your utilities. It automates an email. This is due by this date, and it can send you reminders. Here's the link to do it. And the move-in process itself is touchless. Can't get there during business hours. That's a constraint or some friction. And we have this service to overcome that for you. That's a win in the eyes of someone that works a corporate job that has a heavy commute. And maybe that sets us apart from the crowd, that we just take the time to focus on the things that really matter to you. And we can optimize and customize that experience to the degree that you're seeking. We can make it as personal or impersonal and tech heavy as you'd like it to be, but we really want to customize that experience around what you're seeking, not what we're willing to offer.
Personalized experience, that is the future for sure. I think many residents will appreciate it and would want to stay in your properties for as long as they can. That's awesome. John, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about all things real estate and multifamily. I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will find immense value in the lessons you've shared. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.